Hello, and welcome to another Cloud Podcast, a podcast designed to bring you stories from the smartest minds in IT, operations, and business, and learn how they're using cloud technology to improve business and the customer experience. Well, welcome to another Cloud Podcast. We're excited today. It's been a little bit since our last episode, but no less, we have Stanley with Heartland Food Group, and he is the VP of IT. And Jay, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
And of course, we always like to have Jeff Young along as the CIO in residence and bringing his knowledge. Jeff, thanks for joining me as well.
Oh, I'm glad to be here today. A longtime friend with Jay Stanley. Really anxious to have this discussion today.
Yeah, we're really looking to dive into it and talk a lot about just what's going on in IT, what's going on with just people skills and leadership. But let's take a step back for a minute. And Jay, why don't you just give us a few minutes of your background, how you got into IT, talk a little bit about Heartland, what makes them famous, as we talked about before, and
Sure.
give us a little high level of what you guys are up to.
Okay, so how did I get into IT? Well, it's kind of funny. When I went to school, it was pretty early in technology, I guess, really PC type technology anyways, in the early 80s. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I was good in math. And I knew a couple of things. First of all, I knew I didn't want to be a math teacher, and accounting and things like that did not seem very appealing. And somebody said there was money in computers. And so that's how I went down the path of computer science. It was really that simple. It was that or go in the Air Force or something like that. So that's the path I went down. I went to Indiana State over in Terre Haute, Indiana. And then I started, after that, I went to work for the local utility. It's Duke Energy now. Spent a number of years there. Moved on from there, went into financial, worked at One America downtown Indianapolis. And from there, I became the CIO of Marsh Supermarkets, which is no longer around. I was there for about 4 years before that company went bankrupt. And then moved on from there to go do a little bit of higher ed, did a little bit of healthcare, and then I made it to Heartland. And so it's quite a journey through all that, primarily in the Indianapolis area. So came to Heartland. Heartland, just to tell you a little bit about that, it's a company that's been around 20, 25 years. The guy who started it still owns it and still runs it. We make a lot of different products. The one that you would be most familiar with is Splenda. But we make pretty much every kind of sweetener that's out there. Even under the Splenda line, we have many different sweeteners under that. We make Java House coffee. And so if you're in the Indianapolis area, you'll see those coffee shops. There's probably 5 now, and you'll see more and more pop up in the area. They've been doing very well for us. They're our cold brew product. Let's see. We also make liquid water enhancers, the things you squirt in the water to make it flavored. We have much of the market on that. And there are other products. We do shakes. So we've kind of moved our mission into helping people control sugar, so diabetes care and those kinds of things. So it's kind of an interesting mission for us as a company, helping people reduce sugar. Happier, healthier, longer lives is kind of our motto. And so you'll see the H2L2 now being advertised and those kinds of things. So pretty interesting. We manufacture these products. We have a plant in Indianapolis. We have a plant in Mexico City, in that area. We sell in Europe, Central and Southern America, and the States, primarily Canada.
Quite the business after, I'd say, just 25 years, right? It feels like, Splenda's been around forever, but it's only been 25 and they've grown into quite.
Well, Splenda has been around for a long time. Heartland's been around that long. And then Heartland bought the Splenda brand maybe 6 years ago. And the company's size went from, it almost tenfold the size after they bought Splenda. So it was interesting. And so many of the issues that you would see in my world are kind of residual from being a very small company to being more of a mid-market company.
Yeah, and that's a great segue too, right? Going from a smaller company and then just explosive growth
Uh-huh.
and band-aiding and patching all these different systems together to keep the lights on, right? And
Yeah.
the burden gets to fall on IT, which, it's the lineman of the business, right? You don't get any of the accolades, but when things go wrong, you're the first ones that people are pointing the finger at. So tell us a little bit about some of the challenges. I'm sure there's no one else out there in IT that's dealt with stuff
Well,
like
I'm
this.
sure nobody else has this, but what's the primary way that small businesses manage their business? The tool they primarily use is Excel. And
That's right.
so Excel and Word, right? And even when our ERP was first put in place, they didn't have a reporting system put in. It was primarily Excel that they used.
Mhm.
And so people develop these things. In the old days, it could have been Lotus Notes, early days of SharePoint. Excel is kind of the same thing. These people build these spreadsheets, they proliferate. There's no control of the data, and so nobody can vouch for whether the data is good or not. And it's kind of creates its own monster. And so that's probably been the biggest thing, I would think. And when a company is growing up like that, I think that what happens is a lot of point solutions are put in place because nobody's really thinking about integration. When you're small, you can get away with it, but when you get bigger, when you don't have integration, it causes a lot of manual work. It causes you to do a lot of work on moving data back and forth and those kinds of things. So lots of issues around that. People have good intentions, but they just don't really think about, the flow of data through the processes. Sometimes they don't even think about the process. And so those are the things that cause us to do a lot of work today, is just trying to wrestle with that data and figure out how do we make it usable for the business.
So that I think, Jay, that's something every one of us has fought through. The sprawl of Excel and the embedded VBA code that some people maybe got clever with. So what was your approach? I mean, did you go department by department? I mean, how did you pull those in and get control of that?
Well, I'm not going to tell you I have control yet.
I understood. That's fair.
We're trying to get control. So I think you start back at the process many times, and there's two things. So really focus on the process and figure out how you can streamline the process. But the second thing is, how do you rationalize your systems? You might find 2 or 3 systems that do the same thing, but my motto with the group is integration over best in breed. And so, when we see all these point solutions, what I'm trying to do is figure out how do I integrate everything into my core systems. And when I start doing that, then I can bring that data into more of a single place, and then I can build the reporting and things like that out of those systems. That's kind of, so, we might have an ERP, which we do, but on top of that, other systems were bought that our ERP can do those functions. And so as we bring all that back in, it kind of helps eliminate a lot of the spreadsheets, because they're really workarounds in many cases.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they can't get data back and forth between systems.
Correct.
I mean, that's kind of the starting point. And people take a lot of ownership in those things. So you have to figure out how to make it easier for them when you get rid of the spreadsheets.
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize, because I had the same situation where I was, and it's important to recognize and applaud their efforts, because the users that did this, like you said, they're just trying to do their job. They were trying to manage that tenfold increase in size as well, and they were doing what they knew best in order to get there. And I found, if you approach users with, you should have never built that, that's not right. As you can't do that. They build it, you got to understand why they build it. But then if you say, hey, if we're able to do A, B, C instead, and the benefits will be D, E, and F, those users who are smart enough to build those workaround tools will adopt, accept, and help you be successful with it, is what I find.
I agree with you. You can't take the approach that, you should have never done this, or
Right.
it's pointless. It's how do I deliver better value for you and better integrity of the data? And that's what we get into a lot of times is, we make poor decisions based off of spreadsheets that were built poorly. And so we help them understand how, first of all, how do I drive more process or drive more paper, drive more spreadsheets out of the process, and then demonstrate how much better from an integrity perspective the data is that they can use to make decisions.
Which allows you to eliminate those hours in meetings where the two people were justifying why their spreadsheet said A and their spreadsheet said B.
Yes.
I got a quick question about Splenda, if I could ask real quick, just out of curiosity for our listeners. You mentioned Europe. Is Splenda, and my example is, Diet Coke is called Coke Light in Zurich. What's Splenda in Europe? Is it different names or is it same name? I'm just curious.
It's branded the same. Now, in different areas of parts of the world, you'll see it in different forms. So some countries are, some areas they don't use powder like we do in the States. They might use a liquid form, and so you'll see squirt bottles.
Okay.
And so you might not see it in the same form that you're used to seeing.
Huh. Just curious.
But we still use the Splenda. That's our product. In Mexico, you see Splenda. You walk through a Sam's Club or whatever. It's the same in Europe. We don't manufacture it in Europe anymore, but we do contract that out at times, and then we do send product from here.
Yeah, I'm just surprised at some products that they do get new names, renamed, like Coke Light. It's just, it was interesting to me. So I was just curious. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm sure that may have something to do with just the change in language, as it gets translated in language and stuff like that.
Oh, could be. Yeah.
So Jay, one of the questions I had as you're talking about, making these changes with the Excel and getting people to buy in and, trying to help them create value. You've been there for about 2.5 years. How long does it take or how long for you, I guess, in general, to build the trust and to get in there, not just bulldoze them right off on day one, but it's from what I've seen with other executives, it takes time up to 3 years to where it's like, okay, like now I can really get in there and start making some bigger changes. Like, how's that transition been for you to get what you need done?
It's I think it's a little bit interesting. The IT group before I came here wasn't as focused on the operation in our plant. They were more focused on back office. And when I sat down with our owner and I just asked him when I walked in the door, it's like, where do you want me to spend my time? You're starting to open retail outlets. When I talked about 2 or 3 things, and he just looked at me and he gave me a number for the lost sales because we couldn't get product out the door. And when we talked about it, I was like, that's it. And so what I tried to do is refocus my team on getting out in the business in the plant and really understanding what was going on out there and looking for the projects that we should do out there. And early on, I think people had issues with including us, but we had a couple of people that were really assertive and got out there, and we picked up a couple of projects and got a couple of pretty quick wins. And I think that as we did that more and more, if you look at my applications group, I do not have a large IT group. I have maybe 15 total in IT. We source a lot of things, but everybody that I have in applications has projects that are in the plant or in our distribution center, and having them feet on the street really being out there makes a huge difference. Yeah, and especially when they start seeing the value that you can bring to the table. Now they still don't always think of us. And that's why you got to have your feet on the street, because you smell the project and you get yourself into a meeting and you find out, okay, they're doing this. Well, did you think of these 3 or 4 things? And it's that kind of thing. But I think that we brought some credibility because we've delivered some value for the business. And once they start seeing that value, they see something that they haven't been able to get. They want you there.
Yeah.
Once you've established that credibility, for sure. I know I always stress to my team, I was the CIO at Haynes International, as you know, for many years. And every project we did, Jay, we said, listen, we make and we sell metal. And if what we as the IT people are doing is not promoting one of those 2 things, then we need to rethink what we're doing.
Yeah.
Because
We actually
you've
had
got to be focused on your core.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a mentality too that, once we were done on the project, done with the technical side of the project, that we completed the project. And the thing that I was like, well, that project's not done. And, I got some pushback. Well, sure it is. And they'd walk through it. And I'm like, but the business isn't using it. And it's a business project. And until the business is using it, then the project's not done. And so we've kind of shifted the mentality a little bit. We were having a meeting this morning. I was having a staff meeting with the applications group, and I just brought it up again. I understand what your acceptance criteria is, but I want to know where it's being used. And so that's a little bit of a thing too, and I think that with that shift with people, I think that now that they're immersed in the business, and I want to see it working in one of the plants, and that's what they try to get. It makes a big difference.
Oh yeah. Do you try to make sure you have a user owner then for any of these projects that they're answering to ensure they take it all the way in?
We try to make sure that we have a sponsor from the business community. Yeah. It's, some things, but in general, yes. We don't have a real disciplined project management practice. So being more of a, mid-market type company, it's a little hard to spin up a PMO and things like that. But
for sure.
I think that we're putting in tools in place that are getting some of those things across. And one is getting sign off on scope and those kinds of things,
It's interesting. And I know, Jeff, we've talked about that before, right? Getting in there, improving processes in the business side, right? And being a manufacturer and creating product and getting product out the door and finding those efficiencies will always make the owner happy, right? If you can then bring that project to completion where you actually can build the ROI and show, here's what we did, the users are using it, and now let's find other areas to bring in technology. Talk a little bit about leadership and just employee on your team. It's like employee just building them up more, the mentoring, things like that. Like how have you seen that out throughout your career, and how are you using that currently at Heartland?
Yeah, some of the things that I've talked about are kind of shifting culture. And I'm not going to tell you, I think I'm good at that. I'm not the guy that's going to give you a methodology for it, but I will tell you this, it's finding the right kind of people and coaching people to think differently about the business and how it works. And with this group of folks that I have, which, like I said, it's not very big, but they're all really good. And some unique things that I've got, I've got the manufacturing environment, but the other unique thing that I have is that everyone's required to be at work. And in today's, that this is not easy. So it kind of comes from the top, but we're a manufacturing company. I need you at work. You can't work from home. We could still do it in pockets, but we don't. And so we have requirements, and getting people who will come to work. A couple of weeks ago, we were looking for a contract tech to go roll out desktops. And we went to two different companies. We actually went to more than two, but the first two companies could not give me a resume. And their reason is that nobody wants to go into the office. I'm like, to deploy machines. And they're like, yeah. And so with another company, we ended up getting one resume and we took the person. So it's very difficult to find people. But you still have to be picky about the kind of people you bring in.
Right.
And I think that you just spend a lot of time with them, helping them understand, what needs to be done for the business and why it's important and how they fit into that. It's just, and if they can buy into it, there's just a different sense of urgency, ownership that you get from these people. And I think that that's what my team has right now. When you see that when they go out to the plant and they work with people, they have a different sense of urgency than they used to have. And they enjoy what they do. They're working on more difficult work than they probably ever worked on. And they love it. And I think it's kind of cool. And I'm going to tell you, I'm not the best paying company. I don't, we do have happy hour on Friday afternoon and stuff like that, but it's not, I'm I'm not Microsoft, I'm not doing all that
Sure.
kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
so I think that when you can get people excited around the mission, and I think the team feeds off of each other. So it's just a different, the culture is kind of, it starts with me, I guess, in IT, and it kind of filters down. And I think people just enjoy what they do.
Yeah.
I think too, when you see something like in manufacturing and they're involved in something, they can see that they increased efficiency or they increase quality. And that's great ownership. And there's a lot of things you can do in IT, and you're never going to know if you made a difference.
Yeah, I mean, they can see how they're making a difference, which I think that's what I think a lot of people want to make a difference.
Mhm.
And I think
too.
Yeah, I mean, I want to make a difference. That's probably one of my top two values. And I think that if you find the right kind of people who really want to make a difference, then the money isn't quite as important. Coming into the office, people don't mind doing that. You got to find the right people for it, though. And I feel like I have a pretty good group of people for that.
It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. You hear a lot about that nowadays, right? Where, it might be generational, millennials or Gen Z or whatever it might be, and how, they want to have a mission to work towards, right? And it doesn't just have to be the executive leadership with their one that's stapled on the wall. It's, helping the business unit, the IT department, being able to not just be, the quintessential that you see in the movies, like, oh, they're just a bunch of nerds in the back that are just keeping the lights on. Like, now technology is pushing us through to this new age, right? This post-COVID world that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
If it weren't for IT and technology, the country would have been even in worse shape. And so, like, truly, IT is the hero of COVID. And we've said that before, because if it weren't for IT and the development and technology, we wouldn't have made it through this.
Oh, yeah. I remember when we were worried about the bird flu. You probably remember that, Jeff. I mean, it's what, I don't know, 10 to, over 10 years ago at this point. We were not ready at that time in IT.
Right.
We would have got killed if we would have had to send everybody home. We've come so far.
Yeah.
But, I think, I'm just going to say, I think, from a culture perspective, changing the focus in the group on, making a difference in the business and working with the business people, I think has been really key for us. And that was where the culture shift happened. And that's how that's why my people work the way they do, I think.
Yeah.
So your influence on the workforce there, your group of people, obviously, you've had a huge impact on them, on making them more productive and getting them involved in business like you have. I'm just curious, was that in an existing group that you inherited? I mean, are they mostly 10-year, 15, 20-year employees, or did you bring them in?
No, I brought a couple of them in, Jeff, but no, most of them were here when I came.
Already here.
Yeah, I don't have, the company's not that old. My longest tenured person is probably a little over 10 years.
Well, even though, that's a tribute to you, because it's one thing to bring in people and start them up with your philosophy, but to have existing employees that you're able to, follow you and accept the change in direction and become productive like that, it's a tribute to you. So good job.
Yeah. I think that no, most of the people were here. I think that they were just good people and they were willing. And I think that from a leadership perspective, when we really spend the time to get to know people, and I have this team philosophy thing that I think about when I'm working with groups, and everyone on the team has a role. I have a role, and I articulate to them what my role is. I'm just another player on the team. And I want everyone to understand what their role is on the team. When I was at Marsh, I had probably 40 people. It was a supermarket chain, in case you don't know. And when I first started, I started having full team meetings with them. And the first time that I had it, they were scared to death because they thought I was bringing everybody into the room to fire them. And we as a company weren't in good shape. And then I started doing team building exercises at the beginning of every time I met with them. I did a team building exercise. And we got to the point where, the help desk agents would come upstairs and they would come and sit down in my office and just sit and have a chat, just out of the blue, no meetings. We got to the point where the infrastructure and the developers would talk with each other. It was just, it's getting to know each other. When people really get to know each other, it's much more difficult for them to badmouth each other or make snide comments and so that's what I really focus on is from a people perspective. How do we get to know each other and understand how we think, how each other thinks, and put yourself in their shoes, and don't be afraid to go ask for help because they want to help. This is a team game here, and we're trying to be successful as a team. It's IT, but I think we're a part of the bigger team in Heartland, and I think that we can all make a difference, and we make it more of a difference as a team than we do as individuals. So I always approach it when I think about disciplinary conversations, which I haven't had to worry about that here, honestly. I do it from a team perspective and how that individual impacts the bigger team when they're not performing or when they do things that aren't the way they should do them.
Absolutely. Good approach.
So that's how I think about it. Kind of windy, I'm sorry, but that's how I think about dealing with the people side. I just happen to be the leader of the team, but I have a specific role on the team, and I'm, this is what I do, and this is how I help you do what you do,
Yeah, but just what you're saying there, that builds respect and respect for each other, and that leads to the teamwork and the success. So your approach is fabulous.
And you want to get people comfortable with that. You want to get people to the point where they'll joke around with me, or they'll smart off to me, or they'll say when they're pissed off or whatever. I want to hear that, because if you can get people to that place, then whenever you have real issues, they will tell you the truth about what happened. And then you can move on and you can fix it. And I'm really good with that. I had a CFO in the past that whenever we have an issue, this person would ask me who did it. And I would say, it doesn't matter who did it. I took care of it. And they were like, I want to know who did it. And I would just say, I did it. and they'd get upset with me. You didn't do it. I'm like, sure I did. I did it. It doesn't matter. It has been taken care of. The team is better for it. It's an opportunity to learn, and we figured it out,
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. I was told by a head of HR one day that one employee says, you need to get rid of him. So, well, he goes with me. So if you really need him to go, he's part of my team, and I have to go too. I said, that's when you hear those kind of things, that people don't understand the value. So those are tough days.
You're the guy who stands in front of them. You're the one who, you make it a safe place for them to accomplish what they need to accomplish. And unfortunately, we make mistakes sometimes, but that's how we learn.
Right. I've made many. I've learned a lot.
Oh yeah.
I've made plenty.
That's what they say, fail forward, right?
That's right.
That's right.
It's not going to be perfect, but you have to do it a little bit. So you mentioned the CFO that you worked for. Talk about the executive leadership, the C-level, and how it's been for your transition or digital transformation, all those things that you're trying to accomplish. Do you have buy-in? Has there been struggles? Let's maybe talk about in the past ones too, like how you interact going up the chain. We talked a lot about, people that you're the leader for. How about going up chain?
Yeah, I think in general, again, it kind of comes down to it's trust. It's building relationships. It's them understanding how you think. It's them understanding that, you're not just. I'm not trying to spend money to get the latest whiz bang IT stuff in here. It's not about that. It's helping them understand how we solve problems going down the road, how we set ourselves up for success. It's kind of like, for instance, helping people understand, it's an old concept, standardization. You really want to be flexible, nimble, those kinds of things, and helping people understand how something so simple can help you get there. Real tangible ways to think about, if we can simplify our environment. I'm spending a lot less time working on this IT debt. I'm spending a lot more time working on new solutions and enabling new things for the business. So I think you have to deliver. Okay. If you don't
That's right.
deliver, then nobody trusts you. But I think when you start delivering and then you start having these conversations and being very logical and pragmatic about it, I think that you can get buy-in. Even when I was at Marsh and we were going bankrupt, we were still moving forward with IT investments, trying to figure out how to make the business work.
Yeah.
And, there were times, I had a situation where I was being told to just status quo, just keep it running. And then I said, then let me help you find someone else to be in this role and do that, because that's not how I think. And if we're not moving forward, then we're dying anyway. So we might as well give up.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of passionate about those kinds of things. But I think in general, relationship, and you have to demonstrate that you can perform as a group.
Good.
Yeah. And
Alex, I thought you were going to, after what Jay had said about the employer, I thought you were going to say, yeah, that CFO, what's his name?
Oh, yes, right.
No,
No
names.
thanks. But I think, going back to when you're at the very beginning, talking about just the career path, right? The different companies and different industries that you've been able to work in gives you good perspective as well, right? And everyone's going to have obviously its nuances, but you're pulling from all these different experiences and we're all learning along, failing forward as we go. And I think that there's a lot of value in that too, having different.
I think there is too, but it's funny when you're interviewing how much people discredit you for not having industry experience. When I went into grocery, my resume didn't make it through the first time. And it was because I didn't have any experience. And then I figured out how to get my resume in around HR. And it went to the hiring person.
Yeah.
And then when I sat down with HR, when I was interviewing, I got asked, so how'd you get your resume in here? I didn't see it before I got scheduled for this interview.
Yeah.
And I kind of laughed. I'm like, well, that was the intent. But, it's hard to get hired in different industries. But I've been very fortunate and patient, I suppose, to find those opportunities. And, IT is IT. Most of these companies, you go sit down, you're still solving the same problems that you were trying to solve 10 or 15 or 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But the industry perspective does help. And the different perspectives in the different industries does help frame, how you talk about it and how you think about it. And, I had grocery experience before I came here, where I'm in food manufacturing. And there are parallels, in how we think about managing inventory, and how we think about shrink and different things like that have been very helpful for me. But, I couldn't compete in manufacturing with Jeff. Jeff spent most of his career, in manufacturing. But I still think I bring a lot of value just because I have the different industries.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
One last quick question. I'll pose it to you, Jeff. Like, what would you say that, were there any disadvantages that you felt throughout your career, having been just pretty much with one company versus a multitude of different organizations? Did you ever find that where you couldn't get a different perspective that you maybe wanted, or any challenges around that?
Well, and yeah, for the listeners that don't know, I spent 39 years at that place I was talking about. And I think that's why, I am now involved in these discussions with other IT executives, and why I always was passionate about, going to events, meeting people like Jay, because it is important. It's important that you get a perspective from others. One of my favorite stories is that, one of the CIOs I know is the Swisher International. Swisher's CIO, Eric Dewey. And he and I actually put our operations team together to do demos. And these two companies made cigars and made metal. But the operations people, the infrastructure people getting together from those two companies to listen to each other and learn from each other and see how they approach a problem and what kind of questions they ask vendors. It was great. So, if you are single threaded in an industry, you reach out, find other ways to get to know other people so that Jeff Young can meet a Jay Stanley and get other perspectives, because it is very important to have those perspectives. You can get them through your career path. That's great. You get them through the relationships you build. That's great too.
And you can get them through your employees too, Alex. I mean, I think that as a leader, you surround yourself with people that kind of fill in the gaps in your style and your experience. And I think that you can get it through your employees too, partially.
Yeah,
sure. Agreed.
Well,
good.
Jay, we absolutely are thrilled that you joined us today. Thank you for taking the time. And I love that we can talk about IT without talking about IT. Talk mostly about leadership and experience and people skills and whatnot. And I think that's great because it can go across all the business units. And it was a pleasure having you on. So thank you.
No, I really appreciate it. Jeff and I have known each other for some time now, and this new opportunity with the Confer Group, I think is very cool, and I like the concept, and I'm glad you guys are doing this because I think that there's a need for
Absolutely.
it, and I appreciate that.
Good. Thank you. All right. Great to see you again.
All right.
You too.
See you on the next one. Thanks, Jay.
All
Thank you.
righty.
Well, that wraps up the show for today. Thanks for joining. And don't forget to join us next week as we bring another guest in to talk about the trends around cloud contact center and customer experience. Also, you can find us at adleradvisors.com, LinkedIn, or your favorite podcast platform. We'll see you next week on another Cloud Podcast.